everyone, welcome to Guardian Recovery Live. I am your host, Kevin Michael Lazik. Thank you all for tuning in. And we got this set up just under the wire. We had a little bit of technical difficulties, but we worked through it and we are live. So thank you all for tuning in. I am extremely excited about our guest tonight, Mike Morris, who is the director of aftercare at the Plymouth House, who has an amazing story rooted in service to others. And I am going to hop right into it and bring Mike in. Hey, Mike, how are you?
Hey, Kevin, good. How are you?
Good. We almost choked at the foul line.
Yeah, I know. Tell me about it. We got it, though. We got it.
Totally.
I wasn't much of a foul shooter.
Yeah, I got to be honest. My one chance against Brockton and came down to the wire, and I choked at the foul line.
Is that when Paul Brewer beat you guys at the buzzer?
Oh man, you're gonna go there.
Sorry to bring that. I'm gonna go there on you.
Damn.
They got us. You were the 1 seed. We were the 2 seed, and they got us a couple games before you.
Oh man.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was a playoff game. I think it was just a regular season game. But I can envision it now. It's probably the root of most of my issues in life. Chris had fouled out and Jeff had fouled out. And, here I am with the opportunity to be the hero and clink.
It happens.
It is. So did you play for Kingston High?
I played for Silver Lake.
Silver Lake.
Yes. Kingston is Silver Lake is, at the time, was Kingston, Plimpton, Pembroke, and Halifax. So 4 towns regional high school.
Gotcha. I can't believe you brought up you get me all jammed up right now with Paul Brewer.
Paul's he turned out to be a friend of mine after living in Boston. He's a good dude.
Nice. So you've been sober since 2010. I kind of want to start from the beginning, though. I know you grew up in Kingston, Massachusetts, not too far from where I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about a little bit what it was like growing up and kind of the environment and kind of what ultimately led you to kind of start drinking and other activities?
Yeah. I mean, I had a good childhood. I say good, great, and, terrifying at the same time. I grew up in an alcoholic home. Lots of alcoholism in Kingston. I love the town and I hate it at the same time. It was, we played a lot of sports. I had a lot of friends. The neighborhood that I grew up in, I think every single one of us went on to college and played a sport. We were always doing something. But there was always that fear of when I was done, playing whatever it was, I was going to go home and I wasn't sure what type of shape my dad was going to be in. My dad was, he's a big, tough guy. He was chief probation officer in Plymouth District Court for 37 years. I got sectioned out of his court eventually, but my dad was a functional alcoholic, and he went to work every day. He'd come home and he'd drink 15, 20 beers. And, I knew if he got home at 5:30, things were going to be okay. I knew if it was 6:30, there might be some arguing with my mother. And then if I got home at 8, you never knew what was going to happen. And, the scary part is when you're a kid who's 8 years old, or even younger than that, and you have a younger brother and, a younger sister, just to hear the stuff that, that went on. And it was, the yelling and screaming and behind closed doors when you're that little, you don't know whether, what's physical and what's verbal. But it was definitely scary. And I remember saying to myself that when I got big enough, I was going to do something about it. And I remember saying to myself, when I got big enough, I was never going to be, my dad. And I didn't turn out like my dad in the ways I was just talking about, but I certainly turned out, the ways, he was with his drinking.
And I think this is true for a lot of us. And, although my father, it wasn't alcohol, it was gambling, which is similar, and the dysfunction that it causes and the chaos in the household. And, when you look at addiction, a lot of it is based in childhood trauma. And based on what you're saying, I can definitely see, how you started to go down the wrong path.
And
So
I
you,
repressed a lot of it. I repressed
yeah,
some of it, because I don't even, this is my brother. So my brother's 5 years sober now. My, I couldn't be happier for him and the help that he got, ultimately at immersion. I think that place saved his life. I know it did. But he spoke, I think, for his year or second year or whatever it was, and it was at the Plymouth House. So I was there, and one of the things that he said was, um, he remembers hearing my mother say to my father behind closed doors, "You won't be able to do this to me anymore when the boys get big enough." And I forgot that, and when he said that, it went right through me like a lightning bolt.
yeah. Do you remember the moment? Because, and I know just kind of reflecting back on my own story, kind of swearing off, never
Hmm.
wanting to become like, my father or, go down the path that he did. Do you kind of remember that moment when you first, maybe picked up that first drink and the internal conflict that you faced, having said to yourself
Yeah,
probably thousands of times, I'm never going to be like that. Do you remember what that moment was like?
yeah. It was the 2 nights before I went to college for the first time, and I had never drank before.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, because of that, and immediate blackout drinker. Immediate. Once they talk about the allergy, and once I started, I couldn't stop. And I was at my friend's house, and he was having a party, and we were all over there, and you know, I got really drunk, and but the thing is, nothing happened. Like the next day, I didn't want to drink, and the next week, I didn't want to drink, and I went to college and I played sports, and I, we drank on the weekends for sure. Not much during basketball season, but certainly, the year that I played football, those guys, they got after it pretty hard. Um,
Where'd you go to
and
college?
Bridgewater State.
All right.
So I think yeah, yeah. Um, and I don't know. It wasn't. This didn't. It didn't aff- affect me really, until I get into my 30s. I moved to Boston, and I had a job, I had a car, an apartment, and I could pay my own bills. And my drinking was, on the weekends, or sometimes it wasn't on the weekends.
One of the craziest moments of my life was actually at Bridgewater State College.
Hmm.
Do you remember the pits out in the back
Yeah,
where everyone
yeah,
would go out there and party?
yeah. I actually never went out there, but I know what you're talking about.
Man, there was like
Yeah.
this melee that,
Hmm.
had there been video cameras on there, back in the day, like on YouTube, this thing would have been viral. I
Yeah,
mean, there was probably 50 guys fighting, and it was like,
yeah,
it was scary.
yeah.
So your story is a little unique too, because, a lot of us, start out very young. So, you didn't really, so you get into your 30s, you're successful, you know, by all appearances, you're doing well.
Hmm.
Where did the switch flip? Was
You remember
there something that happened
you remember a bar called the Rack?
in Boston?
Yeah.
No, I remember like Marianne's.
Okay. So it's now the Hard Rock. It's right in Faneuil Hall.
All right.
And we used to go to this place every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, whatever it was. And I remember I didn't love drinking. I would drink, but I didn't love it, and I didn't care to do it every single day. And when I get up, I might not do it for a week or two after being hungover. But I remember being at the Rack, and a friend of mine came in, and he gave me this little blue pill, and it was a Vicodin. It was an extra strength Vicodin, and I'd had a few drinks already. And 20 minutes after I took that pill, I wanted to feel that way for the rest of my life, and I chased that feeling for you know recreationally for another 6 years after that. Until
What year was
obviously.
that, roughly?
What year was that? That was probably 2000. 2000.
All right.
Yeah.
And then so that progressed into the oxys. Did you end up
Hmm.
taking it further?
No, I didn't. I mean, I don't need to. I mean, one of the things I tell these guys is I've never done heroin, but I know I'm a heroin addict. I don't need to try heroin to know
Yeah.
I'm addicted to it. You know what I mean? It
Yeah.
was, for me, it was OxyContin, it was snorting OxyContin, and it was 100 proof vodka. Those were the two things that I couldn't, I couldn't have one without the other.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. It was just OxyContin for me. I got sober in 2004, and had I been living in Massachusetts at the time, I'm 100% positive that I would have ultimately turned to heroin. It was just a
Yeah,
supply and demand thing. I could get them, so there was never any reason to go down that road.
yeah.
But I totally relate to that. I am an opiate, heroin addict, whatever you want to call it, to the core.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to create something 20 years from now in a lab that I'm going to love too. I'm just not going to do it. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah,
Better living through chemistry, right?
yeah, yeah.
There's always something new.
Hmm.
So when did the crap hit the fan for you, and what kind of led you to reach out for help?
I just had a lot of people, come into my life, um, and a lot of them were guys that were a little bit ahead of me in high school that were sober. Most of them athletes, and um, they would never push anything on me. They would always ask me. They knew I wasn't doing well. It's obvious, and I had a friend, this guy Tim, who was probably 5 years sober at the time, and I was living at my parents' house in the basement, right? Because I couldn't afford to live in Boston anymore on my own. And when I could get the money together, I'd drive to my drug dealer's house in South Boston and I'd get what I needed to get. And I'd drive back down Route 3 and I'd get off. I'd always get off in Hanover and stop at this gas station. And three times I bumped into Tim. And every time he just said, "Hey, how's it going?" And every
Yeah,
time I'd lie, "It's going great." And I think the final time, he said, "How's it going?" I said, "Great." And he looked down and he saw me putting $1.25 worth of gas in my car. Things aren't going too well when you're putting $1.25 worth of gas in your car. And more examples of that, like my friend Craig and these guys at this meeting. My first AA meeting I went to was in Hingham in 2008, but this other place I went to was in Kingston, this early bird meeting, and the people there were great. You know, um,
it's funny how and this is one of the things that sobriety gives you is the ability to reflect back, and even in your
mhm.
darkest kind of worst moments, how God, or whoever you want to call it, is kind of strategically placing people in your path, right?
Yeah, I believe
And
that. Hmm.
um, there's no coincidences that Tim kept showing up for you, and that, I mean, that's just, there's no other explanation.
No, no. So it was falling apart for sure, and I remember. So I'd go to Bridgewater State to watch the games, the basketball games. Sometimes I'm living at my parents' house, and I remember this one night I'm coming home, and I was pretty messed up. And it's a road I've driven on 1,000 times, Route 106, and somehow I managed to end up in Carver, way out of the way. I get
Yeah,
pulled over. And the cop pulls me out of the car, and he's like, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "I'm diabetic." That's all I could come up with. And
pretty
he
good in the
put,
moment.
yeah, it was because I didn't get arrested, but he put me in the back of an ambulance, and I got sent to Jordan Hospital. Beth Israel Deaconess or whatever it is now. And at that time I had a 0.34 blood alcohol content and a toxic level of opiates in my system. And I remember the emergency room doctor saying, "You need to go to detox immediately." And I was insulted, right? That somebody would ever say that to me.
He
Um,
obviously didn't know who you were.
you didn't know who I was. No,
No.
no. And so a friend of mine picked me up, and I go to his house and I sleep it off for a few hours. And the deal is I got to go get my car at Carver. It's impounded, and but I got to see this cop first. So this guy, he comes out. I wait for him for like 20 minutes. He comes. He pulls me outside. He's a big dude, and he just says, "Hey," he puts me against the wall, and he says, "If you ever tell anybody that I let you out of that last night in the condition you were in, and we're gonna have a real problem," you know. And I got in my car and I drove straight to my drug dealer's house.
Yeah.
I went to my first detox about a month later at NorCap. Um, and
It's
I'm doing the bare minimum.
respectable for the circumstances.
Yeah, yeah. but finally my family had kind of had enough. And so I've been sectioned 3 times. I've been to the Men's Addiction Treatment Center in Brockton 3 times. My dad sectioned me out of his court twice, fairly embarrassing, right? Um, the first time they let me come home, I spent 17 days there. My dad, because of his job, was able to sign me out of there early. And I made all these promises that, I thought I was going to keep. But I just didn't have the power to. So I struggled for a while, and leading up to the second time I got sectioned, was my first overdose, my only overdose, I guess. I was in South Boston. I remember I bought 4 OC80s, and I had 2 pints of vodka, and I went to my cousin's house in Weymouth. My cousin's a nurse at South Shore, and he works overnight, so I knew I could go there and I could do what I wanted to do, and kind of, be messed up there, and no one was going to bother me. But on the way there, I remember I called my best friend, and this is what I would do. I'd call people, and the reason I would call people is so they would know I was okay. This insane thought. I sounded, high and drunk every time, and I'd be really talkative. And luckily I called him because he knew something was wrong. And, he shows up at the house. By the time he shows up at the house, I'm blue and unresponsive on the floor. I don't remember any of this. I've been told this, obviously. And I'm taken to South Shore Hospital, and, I'm put on a ventilator. This time I have a 0.4 blood alcohol content. I have, again, a toxic level of opiates in my system. And I remember my cousin came in to get me the next day. And first I woke up, and I'm tied to the bed in 4-point restraints, right? So I wake up like that, and I think I finally did it. I finally killed someone, because I don't remember what happened.
Yeah.
And the nurse comes in, and she says, no, you were just tearing the tubes out. We had to keep you safe. And my cousin came in, and he told me what had happened the day before. And he told me that he was there, obviously, my best friend, my mother, and my aunt and my uncle, who were like, you always have a favorite aunt and uncle, right? And they were like 19 when I was born. And, so that they remember those things, right? They remember, playing with me when I was pulling me out of the crib, and my mother remembers getting me off the school bus. And the new memories I'm replacing those with is, me being on a ventilator at South Shore Hospital at 34 years old.
So was that the final time? Is that what ultimately led you to the Plymouth House from there?
The first time, yep.
Nice. Mm-hmm. How many times did you end up at the Plymouth House?
Two times. Within a year. It was almost a year to the day. So that, I got sectioned that time. My dad put me in back. I got sectioned after that overdose. And when I got out, a guy that I met in the meeting had been to the Plymouth House. He came to my parents' house, told them all about the Plymouth House. He had been there. They agreed to send me up there. But I needed a detox first. So my dad, sends me to Matsy and signs me out after 6 days. So I get sectioned only for like 6 days. And then I head to Plymouth for the first time. And that was October of 2009.
So you go to the Plymouth House. At that point, did you make a good effort at it? Did you put some time together post Plymouth House?
No, I did not. I didn't, I did, I got there, and I was going to do everything I could to get back to the life that I thought I had. I convinced myself, I had a car, I had a place to live, I had a girlfriend, and I had a job, right? My car's about to be repossessed. I live in my parents' basement. My girlfriend hates my guts, and I'm about to be fired from my job. But those are the things that make sense to me at the time. Yeah. So I do what I do best then. I manipulate my family. There wasn't the education back then that there is now. I got right on the phone with my mother. I saw that disease model, and I knew that was me. The light bulb went off. This guy Piers showed that to me for the first time in 2009, and I knew that was me. And I told my mother how great this place was, and how I was going to meet the sponsor that they recommend when I come home. And when I come home, I'm going to work harder. And when I come home, I'm going to write this inventory. And when I come home, and when I come home, and when I come home.
How long do you last when you get home?
One day. So I walk out the door of the Plymouth House. Aaron tells me not to make amends to my family, right? What do I do that night?
Make amends.
Immediately make amends to my family. Can't make all these promises that I can't keep. My mother hands me a check for $1,000, right? This is how little my mother knew at the time. And she said, it's your money. You worked for this money before you went to the Plymouth House. And, they at the time spent like $8,000 for me to be there. But of course I took the money and I went to the bank and I put it in, I opened up an account at Bank of America. And the reason I did that is because I knew they'd give me a debit card. And instead of $1,000, I had 1,500. And I knew I was going to overdraft that account immediately. I was able to get high and drunk for 3 days. And on the third day, I couldn't hide anymore. My dad came home from work and I was high and drunk and thrown up on the living room floor, and he was disgusted, and he just left. And I'm sure my mother came home like 4 or 5 hours later. So I'm not high or drunk anymore. I'm in this place that I call purgatory. It's that place where you're waiting around to get high and drunk again. You've been high and drunk and you got to figure out how, because you have no car, cell phone, cash, and everybody knows you've been high and drunk again. So I'm in pretty rough shape.
It's the worst place to be.
It's the worst place to be. And my mother comes home, and I can hear her come home. Now I'm in the basement. Now I'm not afraid of my father, right? Who's my size. I'm afraid of my mother, who's half my size, right? Who's going to yell, be disappointed, be anxious, cry, whatever it was. It just, the state. Like, I can't handle that. But she doesn't do any of that. She comes down the stairs and she looks at me from about a foot away and just says, "Michael, what do you need?" And this is when I did the most selfish thing I've ever done. I looked my mother right in the eyes and I said, "I want to kill myself." And I threw an F word in there. And I don't know. I mean, I can't ever take that back. No matter how long I stay sober, no matter how many people I take, I can't ever take that moment back from her. Again, stealing time, trust, and memories is what, I was good at. And what I did, much more than, any money or possession.
Yeah, I can totally relate in that moment. And, I think the beautiful part of recovery, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but when you get into the amends process, but more importantly, when you're in the living amends, and I'm sure, as painful as it was for your mother back then, she probably wouldn't have it any other way, knowing who you've become and how many people you've helped. But it's painful in the moment.
Yeah.
So at that point, you go back to detox and then.
So they got to figure out
Plymouth House.
No, they got to figure out what to do with me. So, they call the Plymouth House, my family. I get sent up to Portland, Maine, that was where it was recommended I go to begin with. And I go to the Atlantic House, great house I got sober in. I owe that, that's where I love the Plymouth House and I love what I do for work, but I identify my sobriety with, the Atlantic House, because that's where I spent the most amount of time. And I lasted a month. I went there with the same attitude and the same mindset of, I'm going to build up some credit with my family and I'll be up here for 3 more months and then I'll be able to move home. And I didn't even last a month.
So you had said it was about a year, right? In between your admits.
So back and forth, I went, I went home for 3 months. I would go back to the Atlantic House, in March of 2010. And I actually stay sober for about 6 months, but I'm doing some really dishonest stuff, right? I'm lying to my house manager. I'm not meeting with my sponsor when I say I am. I'm stealing money from work. I'm working for a moving company. And, when I'm in the bathroom, I'm looking through people's medicine cabinets to see what they're on, not taking anything, right? Because, I just want to see what they're on. But I justified, the sick thought in my head was I was okay. Like, that was a test. I'm not taking it. But all that dishonesty kind of collapsed after a while. And my brother called me and he said that, Dad fell down and he broke his hip and shoulder and you need to come home. And the first thought that went through my head was not about my dad and his surgery. It was, I'm going to get high and drunk one more time and no one's going to know. And I did that. And that was, a bunch of things happened in between that. I show up, my mother, they know that look, right? And they're, it's bad enough my dad's going through this surgery and now I'm high and drunk again. And, I bounced around and I moved out of the Atlantic House and they let me move back in. I've been to the Atlantic House 4 times. But the final straw for me was I was homeless. I was living in a shed, in Portland, Maine. I'm not exactly a shed person. And when I show my wife that picture. It almost breaks her heart. It's funny to me. I can laugh about it, but to some people, it's kind of, they don't. I'll even tell some of my friends that don't know the whole story, and they're totally caught off guard by it. But I remember being in the shed. I remember I called Chris for help, and he took the phone call, and he suggested the Miller House, and that was a good suggestion. But I knew I'd been to the Plymouth House, so typically you go back to what you know, and
Yeah.
I did that, and I called. So my roommate from college is this guy Bruce that I play basketball with. He's a detective in the gang unit, and I called him, and I said I needed help, and I asked him to meet me at the court, and he did that, and he helped me section myself. And that's how I ended up back at the Plymouth House. My family was done. There was no more money for sober living. There was no more money for food. I had burnt those bridges. So I think maybe, me sectioning myself this last time and not really even telling anybody I was doing it and not making the phone call until I was 4 or 5 days into it, showed some willingness, and that maybe
Absolutely.
I was ready, and I was lucky enough to get one more opportunity to go to the Plymouth House.
Do you recall, going into the Plymouth House, do you feel like you went in with a different attitude? Did you feel like you went in with a different frame of mind?
I would have
Kind of what was,
crawled. I would have crawled
yeah,
from Massachusetts to Plymouth, New Hampshire at that point. I would have
yeah,
done anything. I don't know that there's something that someone's told me, to do that I haven't done. I was done. I was exhausted. I couldn't
yeah.
do it anymore.
It says it right in the big book, right? We became willing as only
Hmm.
as only the
Yeah.
dying, right?
Yeah.
So you're back in the Plymouth House,
Hmm.
and obviously, you've done so well since then. But kind of take us through that experience at the Plymouth House when you were fully open to the suggestions and you were fully open to what they were trying to teach you.
Yeah. I had this guy, Greg Calamaris, and Greg passed away doing CrossFit about 7 years ago. But had I not met Greg, I don't know that I'd be sober. There's some things that happened, to me and people that crossed my paths, and if you take one of those things away, it's it might be different for me. And Greg's one of those people. Greg was really hard on me. One of the first things he told me is I've never taken a first step, and I was, I always thought a first step was, raising your hand in a meeting and saying, "I'm Mike, I'm an alcoholic." He said, "Yeah, that's, but you don't really believe it. You haven't really truly accepted that." Um, and I had to do things differently. The first time I was there, I tore out 3 pages of my inventory and I threw it in the trash. Not because it was hard or tough to write, or I was struggling with some type of trauma in the inventory. It was because I wanted to watch football. And I'd go through like an amends list, even when I was trying to get sober in between my trips. And I took 3 or 4 third steps, and I wrote, 3 or 4 fourth steps, and I wrote some amends list, and I was purposely leaving things off my amends list. Now, I stole $8,000 when I was in sales from ADT, and then I stole a vacuum from a woman, I was working. You ever hear, what a Kirby vacuum is?
Of course.
Yeah. So like, I'm selling Kirby vacuums. Aaron tells me not to get back into, sales. What do? I get right back into sales. I'm showing up at the sober house in a shirt and a tie with the tie down a little bit. And I just look like an idiot, in front of everybody at these meetings. But I got frustrated, and I sold it and I pawned it. And when I'm writing a men's list, I'm leaving these things off, so this time I'm thorough with everything. I'm able to stay as a monitor. I remember I was contemplating coming back to Portland to kind of fix some of the damage I had done. And, again, back to Aaron, he just grabbed me one day, and he's like, after Big Book, and he said, "What are you doing? What do you want to do?" And I just had this moment, and I just said, "Something tells me you should stay. I should stay here as long as you let me." And he said, "Okay." And I was able to stay there an extra 3 months and work with the staff and work on myself and shovel snow and be alone in the chapel, with just me and like a mop, like on a Saturday afternoon, and just kind of reflect on, where I was at, how I
Yeah.
got there, and where I was headed.
It's amazing what happens when you finally take all the suggestions, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You spend all this time, fighting it, doing some of it, you know, and little bits and pieces of it, and thinking you still know what's best, and that moment when you like fully surrender and just say, you know what, I can't, I'm going to trust the people around me. And it's a beautiful miracle that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And I was raised by a pack of old timers, and I did whatever they told me.
Yeah.
And so I want to kind of talk about your life today.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of want to, I know, from your story, there's a lot that's going on with your family. So I kind of want to sit in there for a minute and just kind of talk about, how your relationship is healed. So I think that's an important thing for people to know, especially if you're struggling, that, as bad as things get and as low as you can go and as much damage as you cause, that,
Mm-hmm.
with time and with effort and with, some honesty and open-mindedness and willingness, relationships heal. And, sons become, I lost myself there, but, dads
Mm-hmm.
become dads again, sons become sons again. People get their kids back. Can you talk about that relationship with your family
Yeah.
now?
I think, my family always loved me. They never, you know, they never shut me off. I did some horrible things and said some horrible things sometimes. Um, but just being sober, being, present. I've been able to help people, in my family get better. I've been allowed to help a lot of people from Kingston, find their way to, recovery. And that's been the biggest part. I have a relationship with my mother and my sister live in Virginia Beach, and they're quite a ways away. We just saw them a few weeks ago, and I wish they could see them more. But I'm happy for them and the life that they have down there. My brother's happy and healthy again, and he's got 2 kids, and I don't know that there's a better father than him. And I have
Is
3
your
kids of my own. Good, yeah,
is your sister Amy?
yes. Hmm.
She's giving you a little shout out.
Oh, is she?
She says she loves you, big bro.
No, yeah. See.
And she's watching on YouTube. Amy, if you could give us a little like and subscribe. I'm so bad at that. All those like social media influencers make it look so much more.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
When I got married, I met my wife when I was a year sober, and um, that was in about 10 years ago. A little over 10 years ago. We've been married since 2013. We have 3 kids. I don't. I told my wife this. I don't know. Last summer, I'm not great at communication. Sometimes I with telling people that I love, how I actually feel. One of the things I said to my wife was, I don't give you enough credit for my sobriety. You've
wow.
given me, you give me, a purpose. Of course, that accountability, but especially the purpose with our kids. And I'm going to say the same thing to my mother. It wasn't the right time. I saw her, a few weeks ago at my brother's, but I also don't give, my mother the credit she deserves for, me being where I'm at. I'm really grateful for all the people that have helped me, and the only way I can show gratitude for that is just to continue to help people like I was helped.
Absolutely. And I don't do much to prepare for this, but one of the questions I asked you on the questionnaire was, who is your biggest inspiration? And you did put your wife. That's such
Mhm.
a beautiful thing. And as you said that, you know, it really hit home for me. I should, you know, definitely give my wife a lot more credit for where I'm at today. As great as, I think I am sometimes. And,
Yeah, I know.
what do they say? I'm not much, but I'm all I think about. Um, she has been an integral part of my recovery. And, for that, I'm grateful. And Jimmy Bradley's telling you to stop flexing.
Bradley. Love Bradley. He's the best.
He is. So I know, and one of the things I love about what you do and just who you are as a person is your story today is deeply rooted in service. Can you talk about
Mm.
that and the effect that it has on your sobriety?
Yeah, I mean, my job is different, certainly different than my recovery. I can't ever make my job my recovery. I have a hard job for sure. It's mentally exhausting. I love it. Sometimes when I don't want to say I want to give up, but sometimes when things aren't going great, I'll end up, just having a conversation with a mother, right? Whose son that we're helping that completely turns things around. I have a really, I played sports. I have a really hard line approach, which not everybody loves. I'm trying to get better with, some of that, and I'm not exactly the shoulder to cry on guy.
What are you making
But I have.
people do suicides before they do their step work?
I'll tell you, we can talk offline. Um, so, so I write inventory, right, for my own recovery. I write inventory. I do a lot of like family work. I help families. A lot of the work that we do, at the Plymouth House, especially, is when guys aren't paying to be with us. I think that's kind of what separates us and probably the guys down in Florida at Emergent from other places that, you don't need to be paying money for us to help you.
Yeah,
If your kid's sick, in trouble, you don't know where he is, or he's in detox somewhere and you need a place for him to go. I'm taking phone calls at 9:30 at night on a Saturday and helping people.
absolutely.
You know, so obviously I do stuff outside of what I do for work, because what I do for work is great. It's recovery, but it's a job too.
That was the best advice I ever got when I first started working in treat. I went to Gosnold and went to their TSS program, and that was the best advice I got. That your work can't be your recovery. You need to still
Yeah,
be in a program of action and take care of your own self. You can't be of service to others because it's draining. People, it's draining work, and if you put too much into this, it can suck the life out of you. And
yeah.
if you're not
And you
taking
hear that.
care
You
of
hear that.
yourself, yeah,
You hear that when people relapse. The people are in a profession like ours. They relapse, and I stopped taking care of myself. So that's one of the things I'm just not willing to do. I take steps 1, 2, and 3 happen for me every day. That was drilled into my head at the beginning. People, I feel like, especially in Portland, and this was me too. Initially, I wanted to get up to the 12th step and raise my hand and say I could sponsor people. Um, but the first step I pray twice a day, right, on my knees, very specific, first thing in the morning, and then right before bed. Within that prayer, I have a informal conversation, and I say I admit that I'm an alcoholic. I admit that I'm a drug addict. I accept that I'm an alcoholic. I accept that I'm a drug addict. The second step was explained to me by my friend Chris Gabriel. From I heard him speak at the Plymouth House, another time when I was at the Plymouth House listening to someone speak, and he said, the second step in building a relationship with a higher power is kind of similar to like, who's your best friend? I mean, did you start out as best friends, or or
wow,
or the more time you spent together? Pretty simple. The more time you spent together, the more the relationship grew. The less time you spent together, the more it grew apart. In the third step, I'm on my knees. I'm turning my will over. So that's happening for me. Every single day. We talk to the guys at Glenwood about that a lot. It's one of the big things we do there.
that's powerful. I never really about the second step about
Yeah,
a
it makes
relationship
sense.
takes time. It takes effort. It takes
Hmm.
it's not just something that happens overnight.
Yeah,
I think maybe that's you know where a lot of people go wrong. If you're not seeing the results right away, it's not easy to stick with it. And
yeah, that's true.
well, this has been amazing. I'd love to. I could stay on here all night talking about this. We might have to do a
It
follow
might
up
just be might
episode.
just be me and you after a little bit, but
Actually, we still got a good got 36 people watching live. So,
nice.
and if you're on YouTube, give us a like. Oh man, I can't believe I do that. That's for like a teeny bopper social media influencer, but I'm a company man. Gonna get the subscribers up.
Well, I watch every week. It's been great. The show's been great. I enjoyed it. I enjoy, seeing RJ and Newman, and Kevin last week. So it's been great.
Yeah, it's such a, and I love the story of Guardian just because,
Hmm.
it's rooted in the Plymouth House.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at the sphere of influence from the Plymouth House and how it's really the footprint all across the country, obviously more here in New England, but a lot of the new places that are open, all Plymouth House alumni. Guardian
Yeah.
started Plymouth House alumni, and that's a powerful thing. It's it's
Yeah,
helped
for
so
such a
many
small place in
thousands
the
of
middle
people.
of the White Mountains, it's like, it's changed lives, it's helped families, and it still is. And I think adding that clinical piece is only helped. Is only going to help.
Absolutely. You still play basketball?
No, I stopped. I started. I live in Kennebunk, and I started playing in a league with some guys from town, and my knees just couldn't. I just couldn't do it anymore. I think I got out when I had friends that blew their ACLs out and Achilles, and I didn't do any of that. So I'm done.
Totally. You get out at the right time. I
Yeah.
played a couple of years ago, and I took it to the rack, and like in my mind as I'm taking it to the hole, like I'm going to elevate and
Yeah.
draw the contact and put it up and in. And man, it was like I got this far off the ground. It felt like I threw out my back. But
Yeah, I felt that way a couple times. Your body just doesn't respond like it used to. Your mind knows what to do, but your body just can't do it.
absolutely. We should get Newman though. I think we should bust up on Newman.
Newman's what, the Dartmouth guy? Is he a Dartmouth high school guy?
Yeah, that's like
Yeah.
no good basketball players ever came out of Dartmouth.
We played them. That was we played Dartmouth in the first round of the tournament. That was when the first year they went to all neutral courts, which was awful, especially for us because we would have ended up playing Brockton at home rather than at Taunton.
Yeah.
But yeah, we played Dartmouth.
I used to hate playing that Taunton.
It's awful, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's the worst. I still remember when we were playing Duxbury.
Mm-hmm.
Mickey Curley. We were
Mm-hmm.
playing him at Durfee, and there was a bench clearing brawl. And somehow this big goon ended up on top of me.
Yeah.
And he was like, 6'8", like 300 pounds. And I'm like 5'7", 140 pounds. And he's on top of me. And the only thing I could do was bite him.
Yeah.
And he
they were
screamed
good.
and got off of me.
You guys had some pretty good battles with them.
Yeah. That was a tough loss. They beat us at Duxbury.
I remember reading that in the paper. Yeah.
And then they attacked the bus on the way out.
Yeah, you guys attacked the Silver Lake bus too. Who's the kid from Durfee that attacked that broke the window out of the bus at Silver Lake? You know his name. You don't want to throw him under the bus.
I don't.
Yeah. Yeah, those are big.
The good old days.
Yeah, I know. It was fun, wasn't it?
Well, I want to thank you.
Yeah.
There's been a ton of great comments of just the impact that you've had in people's lives, and for all the work that you do with individuals, families, and the work you do for the aftercare at the Plymouth House. But you are a true power of example, and thank you so much for coming on tonight.
All right, Kevin. Thank you. I appreciate it. If you're in Portland, let me know and come by the house, see Glenwood, have lunch. All right, man.
I gotta go.
When you come to Pine Tree?
Probably next month.
Okay.
Burrow took us to this amazing pizza place.
Burrow's he's got Portland wired. Like he probably didn't
Totally.
he probably didn't pay for any of it either. Or he
is that why he offered to pay?
Probably. It wasn't his card. He's got his hands in everything, so he's got like 4 different corporate cards.
Yeah, I think I counted 5 actually. All right, my man. Enjoy the night. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.